Our first event is titled, Are Secrets Better Buried? Families in Fiction. Donna Heeman's previous novels are titled Tea by the Sea and River Woman, but today she'll be talking about her new novel, The House of Plain Truths. She also serves on the board of Penn Faulkner. Rachel Kong's new novel is titled Real Americans. Her first novel, applause is always welcome for everyone on the stage here. Her first novel, Goodbye Vitamin, was the winner of the California Book Award for First Fiction and named a Best Book of the Year by NPR, the Oprah Magazine, Vogue, and Esquire. Today they'll be talking with Justine Keenan, an editor on NPR's All Things Considered. Nothing makes her happier than getting a book in the right reader's hands, most especially her own. That's a sentiment we can all agree with, right? Well, enjoy the festival. Have a great day.
Hello, thanks for coming. I think this is the juiciest topic, and I love how they framed it, having read these books. But of course, I want to get you, if you don't know the books, I want to get everyone a little familiar with them. So each author is going to read a little section and sort of set up where we are and what we're hearing. Do you want to start, Donna?
Sure. Good morning. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming out so early. So The House of Plain Truth is about a woman who decides to give up her life in Brooklyn and move back to Jamaica to help take care of her dying father. And so the section I'll read is in the very beginning when she's having a conversation with him. Or this happens right after the initial conversation where she asks him to name his children. Rupert named his children, and now Pearline begins to think that some people refuse to be forgotten. These siblings of hers who have lived only in her family's collective memory of a moment on a wharf in Santiago de Cuba, want to be heard. That moment, which marks the last time the living members of her family were together, is stamped in her memory. She replays it now as she has done over the years. Rupert wears his best suit and hat. He's never without his hat. And her mother, Irene, wears a starched white dress, her belly big with the baby she would name Ermina. Pearline is 4 and Eileen 7. Those are the two girls who returned in 1933 to Jamaica. Their oldest sister, Annie, is already a married woman who chooses to stay behind in Cuba. And David and Gerardo, soon to be men, are staying behind too. Irene extracts a promise from Annie to take care of the boys. The goodbyes are loud and long, and the voices like a cacophony of birds, English and Haitian Creole spoken by the people who are leaving, and Spanish from those overseeing the departures. Annie leans over, whispers, "On a clear day, you can see Cuba from there." Pearline believes her, and she and Eileen look out at the blue sea for a glimpse of the distant island, Jamaica. And then they are gone, the last 2 baby girls in the family, repatriated at the government's expense to an island they had never known. Ermina was nearly born on the ship, but Irene makes it to shore before the baby comes. There isn't room on the ship even for a song. A single whistle maybe, but not a song. Rupert wants no disturbance, no outward signs of displeasure or anxiety or disappointment. A ship's passage paid for by the government isn't the way he wants to return home. He wants to come home like the men who went to Panama, the Colon man with his gold chain and pocket watch. So he finds fault in everything, the waves that rock the boat, the men who report from deck on the land visible in the distance, the clouds that roll behind, threatening rain. Pearline and Eileen nervous and fidgeting, looking forward. From where they stand, there's no looking back. Even if they could have looked back, Rupert would have ordered them not to. From the moment he stepped onto the ship, he turned his back on Cuba and his children left behind on the wharf, until now, this moment when he calls the forbidden names. And I'll stop here.
Nice, and we'll go ahead and have you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my I'm also going to read just from the very, very beginning. This is literally the first page. Don't need to know anything, except that it's Beijing and it's 1966. She isn't afraid, but he is. They stand in the darkness before a glass case of old things. A Ming Dynasty inkstone, a chrysanthemum carved from horn, a song painting stamped with ruby red collector's seals. And on a silk pillow, so slight it could be missed, an ancient lotus seed with a legend behind it. The story goes like this. One night, long ago, a dragon emerged from the sky and dropped this seed into the emperor's open hand. His advisors huddled near to examine it. What fortune, they remarked. This seed would grant the emperor his greatest wish. Unfortunately, he died that night. While contemplating his options, he might have asked for immortality. She takes a hammer from her knapsack. With all her strength, she strikes the glass. It makes a beautifully clear sound as it shatters. Quickly, the two get to work, securing the relics. It is an attempt to spare them from the Red Guard's destruction, an act of protest, small, against a movement she's no match for. The seed is unspectacular, so old it resembles a stone. Yet she's aware it contains an entire future, roots, stems, leaves, blooms, to seeds once more, encoded like she is. Her heart pumps blood, her lungs take in air, she sleeps, wakes, eats, excretes. Will her life be long or short? What has she chosen, she wonders, and what has chosen her? She likes the fragrance of gardenias, but not the scent of lipstick. She doesn't mind the rain. She is in love, which feels to her at once easy and hard, elemental and ungraspable, like vanishing and eternity at the same time. She wants to ask of every person she meets, is it this way for you? Hurry, her companion says. A door slams loudly. Someone is here. The footsteps draw closer. They flee. Outside, she opens her fist, and on her bleeding palm rests a stolen seed. The story is fiction, and yet, why shouldn't the wish be hers? I'll stop there.
I loved hearing those side by side for the first time. I think one of the things I'd love for you each to dive into a little bit is both are immigration stories in different ways, and sort of the story of where you come from and where you're going, and how you try to make sense of that. And the story, and I've already confessed this to Donna, like it was part of what the book does is talk about this family who is Jamaican and goes to Cuba for work and then comes back, which was a known story to me. So I thought that was super. I love getting that out of fiction when you get, some fact out of fiction, which is great, which both books have. But do you want to start and talk a little bit about that notion of immigration and the secrets and stories that are sort of inherent when you come and go?
Sure. So the book I started writing largely because my grandparents went to Cuba in 1919, and they lived in Cuba for about 11 years before moving back to Jamaica. And so growing up, I knew just basically that. They were there. I knew which aunts and uncles were born in Cuba. But I didn't know anything else about what their experience was actually like. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to understand that. And by the time I started writing it, of course, my grandparents had died, and the information I can get from my aunts and uncles and my father, it's limited. So I had to do a lot of research to try to understand what that experience was like. And so, once I started researching and looking at, I was really surprised at what I learned, and I really wanted to write a book that incorporated some of that factual information, but really just told a story about a family and about a daughter who went back to Jamaica and was in some ways living a life that mirrored her parents' experience, like some 60 years earlier.
Yeah, Perlene, the main character, when we meet her, has come from the United States, from Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn, right.
Back to Jamaica.
Back to Jamaica, right.
And it's yeah, and it's sort of what she encounters and the stories that she thinks she knows and doesn't know.
Right. Yeah. A lot of it is that, I guess in some ways, one of the things that I've learned is that my parents' generation keeps a lot of things. They don't talk about a lot. And so our generation, we have to figure out a lot of things ourselves. And I think that's a lot of what Pearline encounters as well, that, what she thought she knew about her family, what she thought she knew about the house, and who they were is just really not exactly what it was. And, I think in a lot of ways that's what I think I will continue to encounter, because I keep hearing now little bits and pieces of stories that, like, I did not know that. Like, why have I lived so long and not heard these stories about, like, family members? And, I hope that we all begin to talk a little bit more, about those stories and about what makes us who we are.
Yeah.
Rachel's so familiar, right?
Yeah, I
Obviously.
mean, this resonates so much with me, obviously, because it's, I think, when you, immigration, in the act of immigration, there's so much left behind, right? And I was telling Justine, it's not that people are keeping secrets necessarily even, it's that there are barriers to knowing, right? And there are just things that are sort of unspoken. And I feel so familiar with, what you just said about not knowing about your ancestors' stories. For me, there's a language barrier. A grandparent of mine just passed recently, and we were not that close because we couldn't really communicate with each other. And I felt a grief sort of over what I would never know about him, and I think that that is the sort of, there's this promise in immigration, like the hope that your children will have a better future, but there's also a lot of things that are lost, right? You just really sort of lose this the capacity for a certain kind of intimacy when you share culture and when you share backgrounds.
And continuity.
Yeah, exactly. And both of our books, we start with sort of the perspectives of people who are coming at it from the generation that lost that culture a little bit, right? And they're trying to sort of recapture it.
Yeah. And the thing, again, it was fun reading these books with the theme in mind. But the secrets, it seems to me, sometimes it's immigration, sometimes it's, barriers based on experience, because but then there's also protection, right?
Yeah.
There seems to be wanting the older generations, even the other direction, trying to protect family members, trying to protect each other, and that's one role of secrets. Did you want to jump in?
I think that's the reason I've always been given, for not getting, to hear certain stories, right? Like, and I think, again, it's not out of this desire for secrecy in the classic sense. It's more, why would you talk about that? Why would we want to talk about this thing when it's in the past? I think I was really interested in my book in writing about American ideals and values and sort of narratives. And one narrative that intersects really well with the immigrant narrative is this idea that, the future is anything you want to make of it. And I think America is this very I hope, future-facing, nation. And that is something that the immigrant adopts for sure, right? Like, you want to believe that things are going to be better in the future, and so why would you talk about these things that are in the past and not that savory?
Right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is that too, that you've gone through in some ways horrible experiences, and you're really looking forward to something much better. So you're not really dwelling on what is harmful or hurtful or what it makes you sad. You're looking for that other thing that's just so much better. And I think too, in what happens in my book is that the promise of Cuba was so great for this family as they were moving, trying to make money, trying to, get enough to go back to Jamaica to build a life for themselves. But what they encountered there was just so very different. and what they were able to achieve was just not quite what they wanted. The money wasn't there because of like so many other things happening. The sugar crash in 1920s, just the atmosphere, the ability to work when you wanted to, the wars, the revolts. There was so much going on. And so when you move into a situation like that, wanting to, hoping for, like this big wealth to go back home with that, and that doesn't happen, you end up not wanting to talk about that story at all. And so there is the disappointment, then there's also the guilt. And so there are all of these stories, all of these little things that make your family what it is, but the things that you don't want to talk about because at the same time you're, whether embarrassed about it. And so I think you see a lot of that here. I mean, I don't know, and I won't say that that is the case in my family. I don't know why I don't know some of those stories, but you never know, like what somebody's holding back because of how they felt or how they feel about something else.
Right, right. One of the things that Rachel explores in her book, and you explore also, Donna, but not quite the same way, is the science of DNA is very much and who we are because of DNA, which is its own secret. It's like this biological secret that I was about to say one can never know, but we're of course learning more about. And then the sort of generational, secrets, that things that get buried. Did you?
Yeah. I mean, I was so interested. It's funny, Donna, you mentioned, the stories that make people who they are, right? And DNA obviously is that story. It's a code. It does make you, in part, who you are. But I was really interested in exploring both DNA and those family stories because as an immigrant, I came here when I was 2 years old. So it wasn't actually my personal decision, but I felt all those pressures, right, to assimilate, to, I had one sort of situation going on at home and then a different situation at school. And I feel like I've always been very in tune with the fact that my life could have gone another way. I think everyone has that, right? You have sliding doors. That's you think oh, I made this decision, this moment happened to me and my life will never be the same. I think I've always been so aware of that because that question is hanging over me. It's if I had not come to America, if my family had stayed in Malaysia, who would I be? Would I be a writer? I don't actually know because I think I had to be this really lonely kid going to libraries and, just reading my books in order to become a writer. I don't know. Maybe I'd be so well adjusted in Malaysia. I have no idea. Instead, I'm this I mean, we can't get into it here, but so I think I've always wondered, why am I the way that I am? And I think a reason is DNA, of course. Another reason is all the experiences that I've had in my life, all the experiences my parents have had in their lives, and then their parents before them, right? So I think I was just so interested in that question, how does it all fall? What do we weigh more? What matters more? How much can parents really F up their children?
I mean, similar, right?
Yeah, and I like what you said about the, the experiences that your parents had before, because all of that, we're not always aware of just how it affects who we are today.
Yeah.
But I think so much of that just really feeds into exactly who we are. It's the stories that our grandparents tell, then the stories that our parents tell or choose not to tell, and then the stories that we we experience for ourselves, but they're all connected.
Yeah.
And I think so we don't always stop to think about how each of these things are connected and how they all make us who we are. And I think, in America especially, I think there's this idea that we are all these individual people and, we chart our own destiny. But we chart it to a certain extent, but of course, all of those stories and all of those experiences really make a difference in who we are.
Yeah, I love what you just said about, people are deciding what stories they get to tell. And again, America itself is so much this nation about telling the story that makes us look the best.
Right.
Right, and sort of, being very selective about what those stories are. But the reality is that I mean, I think for me personally, like these like shameful moments, these traumatic moments, they do make up a big part of who I am, right? And I think that yeah, there's something to. I think in writing, I'm curious about exploring those parts, right? Like just not the propaganda, right? The actual sort of shadowy side behind that.
Yeah, I think a question in both books is, you know, you can move continents, you can cross oceans, but can you? Like, how much, you know, aren't you still yourself
Wherever you go.
I was just about to say, not to say that. And that's, you know, that's true of the parents in both families. And I mean, I think Perlene's experience is really interesting because she's gone to the States. She's and how her family judges, the sisters especially, judge her for being that person. Talk a little bit about her and who she is in both places, and who she thinks she is.
Who she thinks she is. Well, I think Perlene is like very many immigrants who you will probably encounter. She comes, she works hard, and she works multiple jobs because she is one, helping to take care of family back at home, but also trying to build a new life for herself here in Brooklyn. And so that's the way she has defined herself for a very long time. So when she decides to give up business, as she calls it in the book, and move back to Jamaica, I think she is a little bit uncertain about who she is. Partly also because she has lived so long away from Jamaica that she thinks of herself as a foreigner. Her sisters see her as a foreigner, and she doesn't know exactly how she is fitting in or how she will fit in you know, like her life that she has gone back to try to pick up again. And I think there is, you know, like I think for so many of us who have lived in different places, whether you've moved from the Midwest to the East Coast or you've moved from, you know, like the States to Canada, you know, like whatever it is, you are a new person, but you're also that older person. And in some ways, you're trying to make all of those parts of you or all of those new yous. I don't know how you exactly, you know, how you define it, but you're trying to make all of those parts of you work together. Sometimes it fails, sometimes it works very well, and sometimes it fails because of what other people expect you to be as opposed to how you see yourself. And I think a lot of that is what Perlene encounters when she goes back to Jamaica. Her sisters had remained in Jamaica. They took care of her father, and now here she comes in ready and willing to take over the house and to take over everything else. And they have one expectation of what their life should be like when he passes. They plan to sell the house and you know, take the money and do something else with it. And Perlene is, because I think she's been away for so long, a little bit rooted in the past. She's trying to hold on to that aspect of her life, and maybe she can't go back. Can you ever go back to being that person? Can you ever truly go back to living that life again? And I think that's part of what she's trying to understand when she goes back.
The Persephone myth would say no. You're always changed for having left. The other thing that she's challenged with is the daughter she's raised.
Right.
And then she gets to kind of have this do-over with some family members who end up with her in that house.
Right. Yeah, so Perlene, because she was working so much while she was living in Brooklyn, didn't have the kind of relationship with her daughter that she really, truly wanted to have. And when she goes back to Jamaica, she inherits a little girl who is living in the house, the daughter of the woman who was taking care of her father. And her nephew, who she didn't know existed, also comes back to Jamaica, and she gives him a place to stay. So what Perlene is able to do as she is reordering her life is she gets a second chance to be the mother that she wasn't with her own daughter several years earlier. And so I think that's part of that whole process of reinventing who you are, of building a new life, of going back home and getting this opportunity to redo where you think you made mistakes. And I think in some ways her experience is a little bit different from her father's, because when he left Cuba and he came back to Jamaica, well, in some ways, I guess they're not different, they're the same, because he came back to Jamaica with the same idea, that he would build this life that he wasn't able to build for his family in Cuba. So I think there is, certainly some similarities in both of their stories, because they are both coming back home and trying to be newer and better people.
Rachel, listening to this makes me think of the parents in your book and becoming the parents they wanted to be for their kids versus the parents that they were sort of forced to be and sort of the secrets that were wound around all of those factors.
Yeah, I mean, Donna, as you're talking, I was thinking about, you mentioned the ways in which the characters sort of repeat stories that they don't even know happened. To the children are repeating, not necessarily mistakes, but just there's echoes of their parents' lives in them, and they don't even realize it, I think, because these are stories that their parents haven't told them, right? And also, how could you? The sort of specificity of who we are in our day-to-day lives, you couldn't really be okay, and then on March 25th, 1972, I did, you know what I mean? There's so much that makes you who you are. So I think that, that's really fascinating to me. I mean, I think the fact that, that we're sort of, unless we talk about certain things, we're sort of doomed to repeat them at times. I think that the parents in my book specifically often are reacting to the way that they were raised, because I think each of the parents in this book are really doing the best that they can, but they have limited information. I mean, not through any fault of their own, it's just we all have limited information. We all just have the perspectives that we have and the life experiences that we've had, and they make us see the world in a certain way. I mean, I'm thinking of that especially now, right, in this in the lead up to the election, everyone has a very different perspective, and I think that they can't fully understand their children's lives because they haven't lived their children's lives, right? And so I think they often put these policies into place that their children, it's not benefiting the children, even if it might have benefited the parent as a child, right? So I think it's sort of they're parenting their children in the way that they wish that they had been parented, but it's not necessarily right for
the best
that
way,
other person. And so I think it's so heartbreaking to me, but I also think it gives me more compassion for everyone who's just trying, right? If you're trying, even if you're doing a really bad job of empathizing or whatever. I don't know, it's compassion on both ends, right? I think compassion for the parent, compassion for the child. And that was something I was just so interested in. I think just the way that it is perpetuating really, into the future.
Right. And I'm trying to think how much to share, but because the secrets in your book are between parent and child, but then there's also, once some of them are revealed, how people react to them differently.
I mean, I think, Donna, in your book too, there's a lot of the kind of feeling you might tell somebody something and then just deciding maybe better not to. I think I was thinking the other day about how writing a novel is the sort of deepest conversation I get to have. And I think I know that this is true because when I read a book that really changes me and that means so much to me, say I meet the author, there's nothing I can say. It really pales in comparison, right? I'm I loved it! And then I panic because there's really nothing you can say to sort of convey the depth of what it means to really connect to a book and really have it mean something to you. So I know that when I'm writing the book, that's a conversation, even though the sort of conversation is a little delayed, the reader receives it on the other end and is creating it with me on the other end. It is this incredible, rich conversation that I get to have, and I've always been a little bit mistrustful of the verbal kind of conversation, right? Because there's so much that gets miscommunicated, our memories are faulty. That's something else that I feel, very sort of obsessed with, right? The fact that we can live through the same experiences, we can be on this panel together, and tomorrow remember completely different things about it. And that's nuts to me. Like, it's just so subjective and so sort of, like faulty, right? And so I think that's just something that I wanted to capture in the text itself, like this struggle to want to say something that really matters to you, to another person, but kind of failing because you know that it's maybe doomed to begin with or won't be perfectly understood.
Yeah. We're talking about verbal memories, and I said this to Donna when we spoke, but not to you. But I think the food in both of these books, and what food conveys and relays, and the communication. I'll start with you, and also because there's some class issues and sort of what the messaging is through food.
Yeah, I mean,
the secret's also sort of inherent, like what they're messaging.
Yeah, I mean, food is related to. I love. It seems like you love eating too from the book, and I loved all of those descriptions of meals. But yeah, you're so right that often the meal is sort of a stand-in for what this person can't say. But I think for me, in this book particularly, the food is about. It is wrapped up a little bit in class. We were talking about, these versions of yourself that you are, right? Like, I grew up eating a certain way, and then as an adult learned how to eat other food. Food kind of tells you who you are at various stages, but it's also this thing that, everyone has to eat food, and yet there's such a disparity in, what people, some people don't have enough to eat, and other people get to, put gold on stuff and eat it, there's just such a huge disparity, and I think that's so interesting. To me, it's almost like a wasted opportunity if you don't incorporate food as another atmospheric element, or almost, it really says so much about who a person is, depending on what they're eating. In my book, there is a teenage boy who, I don't know, he works on an oyster farm. I don't think this is a spoiler. He works on an oyster farm, is kind of creeped out by them because,
he knows too much.
Yeah, he knows too much. One of his jobs is to beat them with a bat because that makes the shell into this smoother cup-like shape for the restaurants. And so he's working at this farm, and he is no, I'm good. I don't want to try this. It's only sort of later when he's in this fancy restaurant that he decides, okay, I'm going to try this because, I want to impress this person that I'm with, and once he does, it's almost this next level achievement unlocked. It's okay, now I'm a person who does this, and I'm a person who knows about what an oyster tastes like.
And I was thinking about May too, and her messaging that she chooses when she's first in the States, and tries to convey to her daughter about who we are and how we eat, and this makes us American. And
I think there's there's a sort of parent-child duo in this book who, the parent just really wants to assimilate, right, and to sort of be above reproach in a way in America, right, and for her child to not be in touch at all really with her culture that she came from, because she thinks, again, that future-facing perspective. It's you don't need the past. The past actually was horrible. I didn't like the past. We're just going to focus on English. We're going to eat American food. You don't need to be in touch with this culture that you left behind. But I think that there's something so lost in that. And yeah, Donna, your food descriptions, I loved them so much, and they made me really hungry.
Oh, well, good. But yeah, food is, I think if you go to any Jamaican household, you're going to be fed. And so I think that is a part of what
we are well fed in this book.
Yeah, you're well fed here.
Yeah.
But so I think a lot of it is that it's just growing up with that sense that food is always present in some ways. But I think part of it too is that I remember whenever we'd go to my grandparents, usually on Sunday afternoons, there was just always food. There was just always chicken, and it tastes a certain way. I've never been able to replicate it because I just don't know what she did. You know, it was the same thing. It was just some kind of baked, or stewed chicken. I don't know, but it was really good. You know, rice and peas, and usually there was carrot juice, which is, I don't know how many people love carrot juice, but I absolutely hate it, and I would never drink it again. But, you know, so I think there's some of those things that just feel like a part of who we are. It's just, it's there. You know, like unlike, you know, your character, May, I think most Jamaicans that I know here have brought all of that food with them. There is no sense that we're leaving our foods behind. You're eating it. You're, you know, like that's, I guess, a part of just simply who we are. So, you know, that's why it is here, and I will probably continue to do that in every other book that I write. There will be food, lots of food.
I think in your book, it reminded me of the fact that instead of stories, you know, my mom, it's not that she doesn't want to share, she just kind of, and maybe I don't have the right questions, but, you know, it's also hard to get stories out of her, but I think her way of communication really is just like feeding me a lot and feeding me dishes from that she grew up with, right? And so that in a way that's like this really direct communication, because then I get to sort of feel what it was like to, you know, be a child, you know, like to be growing up in her household. It's sort of this like lineage, which is really cool.
Well, and May flips. I mean, there's a moment where she's like, you know, goes really hard for.
Yeah. Well, that feels related to, the fact that, you know, wherever you go, there you are, but also the fact that you can have these past versions of yourself and you can try to like shove them into a closet or something, or you can box them up, but they're gonna come find you when you don't want them to. Yeah.
But I like what you said too, that food is communication.
Yeah.
Because I think that really is what it is. For some people, that's all that you have to offer. I don't want to tell you stories, but I can feed you. I can give you that. I can't say I love you, but I can feed you, and you will know from that, you know, just how much I care. So I think there is just so much of that that's built into, I think, in, you know, like in our stories.
Yeah, I was going to say that because even in Rachel's book, there is, I love you, but it's not felt. It's said and not felt. And I think it's felt more in the food in those moments later.
Well, I think about how, I love you is not for everybody.
Right, yeah.
And I think that, people just have different ways of showing love, and people have different ways of receiving that, right? And so there's, again, it's this mismatch in communication that I find so interesting. Like, how do you convey love when the person that you love wants to receive it differently than you're able to offer it? You know, so if there is a mother who, she says I love you, like because she knows her daughter wants to hear it, and yet it's not something that she necessarily.
Very performative.
Like it kind of has to come from a deeper place. And for her, I think cooking is a way to show love, because that's the way that she experienced it. So I find that so interesting, the ways in which we're always like slightly missing each other, even when we try really hard.
Yeah. I'm just going to note that if there's questions, we'll take those in a minute or so, a couple minutes. And there's 2 microphones here, so just wander up. And we'll keep talking, but just give everyone a little notice on that. Are secrets better left buried, or will secrets always come out in families?
Well, we're both writers, so I think probably
Watch out.
We're anti-secret. Or I don't know, not anti-secret, but I think it's more interesting to get into them than to pretend they don't exist. I don't know.
I'll just say, tell me all your secrets.
Yeah.
But I think family stories, I think they will come out in some way, shape, or form. And, like especially when you go back to DNA, for example, now, I mean, there's so many secrets that people are uncovering because of DNA tests. Maybe at one point you could have, like withheld a lot of secrets, but now we just can't. It will come out.
I will say, I think that, secrets, like whether or not they come out, I think sharing secrets is, a way to have intimacy, right? And I think that's something that, I don't know, like is so interesting to me. Like I think we often hold a lot of things back, or the characters in my novel especially hold things back because of what we were talking about earlier, like the fact that you want to sort of put your best foot forward, you want to tell the story that sort of, propels you into the future, and you don't want to linger over this like unappealing past. But when you sort of reveal the imperfection, reveal, the harder times, like I think that's where these characters in the book actually get to connect. They get to have these moments of like, oh, I see you, I understand why you're coming from where you're coming from, like why your perspective is the way that it is. And so, yeah.
And I think whether they're, in both books, whether they're revealed or not, they're always present.
Right.
They're in the room.
They're in the room because they're part of who you are.
Yeah.
And I think there is no way really to get fully away from it, because all of those stories, in some ways, the bits and pieces that you know are shaping who you are.
Yeah.
And sometimes what you find out can shift who you are. So I think there's always some way in which that secret is going to come out, and really should come out, because, you're family.
I also want to say that, like, I don't know, a lot of the characters in my book, especially, like, they don't even, there's secrets that they're keeping from themselves.
Yeah,
yeah,
right?
sure.
There's so many things that they don't want to acknowledge or are totally unaware of. And I think that I'm still thinking about, like, you're talking about the past selves and the versions of ourselves that we sort of stack up, I think, over the course of our lives. But in writing, I lean into that. Like I come to the draft like as a different person, like a slightly different person every day, and that's what makes a book eventually. It's these like layers of self, and like the ways in which like maybe on Monday you had no idea what this character was going to do, and then on Thursday suddenly you do. Like that's so weird. I didn't know. If I knew it from the beginning, novel writing would go a lot faster.
Indeed.
But I don't know, and that's like a secret, that's just like inside that I have to keep working at and keep showing up for. Yeah.
I see we have some questions. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just real quick, a follow-on to what you were just saying. You both have led very rich lives and have a lot of stories to tell. How do you decide what it is that you want to write about when you think about a book?
We'll start.
I think it has to always start with what I'm interested in, and not just interested, but probably obsessed with, like the questions that I kind of can't let go of. And I think these like really, fundamental stories of like parents and children and families, I think the questions that sort of make me who I am, that's what I'm interested in. And I know that it's a novel when it's sort of too unwieldy for a short story. Like I often start a novel as a short story, and then we'll realize, oh no, there's way too much here.
Yeah.
I think similarly, there's usually a question that I have that I'm asking and that I want to answer. And so in this case, of course, was what was my grandparents' experience in Cuba like? And usually that's where I begin with whatever that is, and then it begins to take shape. I don't necessarily know how the story will take shape, but just basically what that question is that I want to address or I want to understand.
Okay, great. Do you want to go ahead?
Thank you for writing these beautiful novels, first of all. And how did your parents and your families digest the novels and how they were perceived, basically? I know, loaded question.
No, I think my family is interested, I would say, in what they didn't know. Yeah, so there was nothing, there was no real family secret here, except that there's some people who are wondering who are the people and which house it is, because as you can imagine, in just about every family, there is some issue about a house and what do you do with it. And it's not them, it's not our house. Or not my grandparents' house, but I think a lot of it really was just understanding and uncovering what that experience in Cuba really was like or could have been like for my grandparents.
Yeah, my parents are not big readers. You know, they took me to the library a lot as a kid, which again, I'm indebted to them for. But they're not big novel readers, and so it's not something that I'm able to really connect with them. I mean, I write the book because I want them to know things, but you know, it's never gonna quite reach them in the way that I wish, again, because there's this divide in culture and perspective. But I think they are really proud of me, which is really meaningful to me, and I think that I have been able to sort of connect with my brothers a little bit more about it, you know, because I think we do share more generationally, and yeah, and I think there are questions that we get to sort of work out together. So yeah, I think that it made me sad at first that like, oh, my parents will never read a book in the way that I want them to. But the reality is nobody reads the book in the way that I want them to. Like every reader, and that's like actually like a beautiful thing, right? That each reader is creating this completely unique experience because again, your perspective is so specific and so it brings so much to the book. But I think that, yeah, it's that's okay. Like I think writing this book helped me realize that there are different ways to show love, right? And to receive love, and perfectly understanding a novel is not necessarily a love language that we need to share together. Yeah.
Did you want to go ahead?
Hi, thank you all so much again for being here today. I have a very similar question, so I'll kind of ask like, whether from the perspective of your character or your perspective as a writer, when you're drawing inspiration from family experience, how do you sort of negotiate your own version of events or your character's version of events with like other stakeholders' interpretation of events, like your family members' interpretation of an event?
Well, the good thing is that when you're writing fiction, you really don't have to care what anybody else thinks. It's your story, you're making it up. But I think in some ways I tend to write about people who do not resemble family members, don't resemble anybody I know. So if there is somebody who reads something and thinks that's them, it's not them. It's complete. It's all made up. And so that's really my approach with fiction. It's just mine.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing, like fiction. It's fiction.
Do you, when you're writing, like first draft, early, you know, you in the paper, are you thinking about audience at all, or you're just trying to get through it? You're just trying to get words on the page?
I think I'm just trying to, I think of myself as the reader, you know, because in a sense I'm writing the thing that I want to read, the thing that I wish existed, and yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it might sound selfish, but I really am writing for myself because there is that question that I want to answer. And so I'm not really thinking about you, sorry. But you know, I hope that if it's something that interests me, that it will also interest other people.
And it's funny, like the way that often when you write a book and it is fiction, people like to assume that the main character is you, or they're like, okay, but what really happened here? In this book, I was like, I'm gonna make this so outlandish that nobody ever asks me that question again. But I think that, you know, family members who have read my book, like my parents did read my first novel, and they, you know, people would wonder, am I the protagonist in this novel? And my parents knew that they weren't the parents because it was so clear that I had made these people up. So I think, yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting that there's this desire to like want to know somebody through their writing, which I feel as well. Like there's I think a natural human curiosity, but I think the truth is really in the questions that the book is asking and the sort of like obsessions that the author has, and less so with the actual biographical details, which are not that interesting anyway.
You know, once my mother read a short story I read, and I have 2 sisters, and I think the book had 2 daughters in it, and so my mother's question was, well, what happened to the 3rd child? You know, it had nothing at all to do with me. It did not resemble our experience, but that's the way she was reading it.
Yeah.
There should be 3 girls in this book, so.
What happened to the 3rd child? No, just. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and for these books. I'm really curious about, so Donna, you mentioned that you were inspired by like your grandparents' story, and I know, Rachel, in your book, there ultimately is some conversations that skip generations, like between a grandchild and their grandparent, and so I'm curious about how you think that secrets and stories are different or have a different relationship when the 2 generations are not touching, like when there's a parent or someone in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm sort of just repeating what I said before, but I think that the secrets are a little baked in, right, when you have these huge gaps in age and understanding. I think, I mean, at least in my family, I'll speak for myself, like it's, there's so much like sort of work that has to go into trying to meet in the middle, right? Like it's really, there's so much to sort of talk through, if talking is even the medium, right? And between me and my grandparents, for example, like it's not. So I think that, I don't know, the secrets are just, they're unavoidable, at least in my particular immigrant family. Like it would be, I think, really, really hard to uncover them all.
I think, I guess in my case, what it is that I don't think my parents were deliberately trying to be secretive.
Yeah.
I think it's just who they are. And so now that, you know, I am looking back and trying to understand so many different things, I realize just how little I know. And so I think a part of it is that now that I know so little, I am going back and trying to recreate stories or trying to understand what it is. So I think, you know, it's just who my parents are. I mean, that's the way I have to look at it. There are some things that, you know, like I discovered when I was, I don't know, a few years ago, that my father had, you know, like made this thing out of wood. It was nice carved in the shape of Jamaica. I have it at home. I didn't know that. I had no idea that he could, you know, like had any kind of skill, like to make something. So even something as simple as that, you know, it's something that he just never showed us, never talked about. And it's not a big secret, but, you know, like for me as a writer, it just feels like, why didn't I know that? You know, so some of it is just these, you know, like small things that are really insignificant to them, but to me it just feels like something that I should have known.
Well, and the self that you are interested in versus the self that the person wants to present.
To present, exactly.
Yeah, which is in both books too.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi. So I have a question. I heard discussion about secrets and food, and it made me think about, at least in my family, and I can't speak for everyone's family, but for my family, and I think for some others, women are often the keepers of secrets and are in charge of keeping the secrets, and they also, at least in my family, were in charge of making food. So this is very imbued with gender. And I wondered if you could speak to that, and when you're writing this work of fiction, how you grapple with that complexity that women often are made to keep the secrets, even if it's innocuous or non-innocuous, and make the food. How is gender imbued in that story?
You know, it's an interesting way of looking at it, because in my case, it is Pearline it's the father who was keeping the secrets, Rupert, and he now is asking his daughter to be his memory. and to be the keeper of the family stories. So I think she is not trying to hide the secrets or not trying to keep the secrets, but really trying to just understand and to make sure that what she has learned is now a part of the story, of the family story. So, like I'll think about your question a little bit more, but I like, like that idea, like how it plays along gender roles.
Yeah, I think similarly, I have to think about that question, but I think that, again, my book is very much about how we become who we become and what it is about us that sort of shapes our perspective, right? And so in the book, it's narrated by 3 different characters. 2 of them are women, and then 1 is a boy and then a man, I suppose. But I was really interested in how their gender identity shapes how they view the world, how they exist in the world, right? And it's just very different for the characters based on what bodies they have going, just like existing in the world and how they're treated, how they get to treat other people, what they get to ignore, what they're not even confronted with, right? Like I think all of that is really just so complex, and I think that's why I'm interested in writing novels, right? Because you can really get into just these really knotty questions. And I think that, even if this sort of earlier question made me think about the fact that, even if we're not getting family stories exactly right, I think the sort of exercise of trying to imagine what it might have been like, that is valuable, I think. And I think that imaginative exercise, it does bring me closer to the loved ones in my life, even if it's not, exactly what their experience is, right? So I think that exercise of imagination, I think, is what, what I do this for. Yeah.
Try to squeeze in one last question.
Thank you. My question is mostly for Donna. So a lot of what you said has resonated with me as a first-generation American and daughter of West Indian immigrants. And I was wondering what one of the sort of highlights or surprises that came out of doing the familial research that went into your book and speaking to family members, understanding your family's history in the same context of the time period you're writing about. What was one of the biggest surprises or biggest aha moments that sort of contextualized your life that came out of that process?
Well, the biggest aha moment, I don't know if it really contextualized my life. It was just really surprising. So my grandparents went in 1919, and in 1917, which I have this in the book as well, there was a revolt in Cuba, and 17 Jamaican men were lined up and shot. And when I read that, it really changed the scope of the book and the shape of the book, because I had no idea that that was the sort of things that were happening to immigrants in Cuba at that time. So I started thinking, one, would my grandparents have known that that was happening? Would they still have gone had they known? What kind of information could have changed their relationship or their decision to go? So a lot of it was that kind of stuff, because I learned none of that in school, and I had not known about it until I started doing the research. So it really just changed what I thought about the immigrant experience, how I think about the immigrant experience over the years and even now. Because I think, I can see so many similarities too in the experience here in America for very many people and the experience, 100 years ago for people, in Cuba.
Well, thank you both.
Thank you.
I can't. I'm going to just rapidly endorse both of these books, and I hope everyone goes to get a copy and get their book signed, because that's where you guys are headed off to next. And thanks to everyone for coming.